Hello, everyone. It's me, William McQueen, and welcome to the next installment of Stories for a Moonlit Night. Today's story talks about a young boy who finds himself in a philosophical discussion about God in a place he never would have expected. Today's story I call The God Quest. Young Timothy Barlow was born and raised in a small town in California. But his mom and dad and older sister, they were born and raised in a town in Arizona. And every year, once a year, mom and dad would load up the car, take the kids, and head to Tempe to check out the old stomping grounds and the old neighborhoods and see all the places they used to know and see how well things have progressed or how things have deteriorated over the years. And in the beginning, Timothy thought it was very exciting. He used to look forward to the trip. He got to meet new people, see new things. He got to see all the old places where his family used to hang out. It was fun. But then, as the years went on, he didn't find it as exciting anymore. In fact, there were times when he hoped his mom and dad would forget the trip altogether. He found there were other things he'd rather do with his time. And now that he was 14, he found that the majority of his time was spent trying to figure out how to meet and impress girls. His body was going through a lot of hormonal changes, and he was trying to cope with all the different feelings that he was experiencing at the time. And as a result, he felt very much alone. And he spent a lot of time alone, lost in his thoughts, trying to think about his future, think about his place in the world, think about mostly how to meet and impress girls. And one night, on their latest trip, Timothy snuck out of the motel room while his mom and dad and sister were sleeping. He just wanted to be alone with his thoughts for a while. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the motel grounds were pretty much deserted. Even the clerk in the office was dozing off. I mean, after all, there was no one checking into the motel at that time of the night. And eventually, Tim found himself over by the pool. I guess he was hoping to find a girl there, but there was no one. Just him alone in a star-filled sky. But then something strange happened. A sensation in his head. He started getting this weird tingling feeling, and his head began to feel very warm. He grabbed a hold of one of the pool chairs for support because he was getting very lightheaded, and the sensation grew. It scared him. But then, before long, the sensation went away, and it became more of an impulse. And he found himself getting up and walking out of the pool area and wandering to a deserted area behind a shed in the back of the motel property. He didn't know why, but he felt it was very important that he go there. Tim was extremely frightened. This wasn't the sort of place that he would go wander off onto on his own. There were no lights. There were no sounds of crickets or anything that seemed to be alive anywhere. The air was deathly still, and he scanned the trees and the bushes and the overgrowth with his eyes, trying to get a sense of whether anything was there, because he had a strong feeling he was not alone. Something drew him there. It was almost as if a force of will compelled him to that spot. He didn't know why, but the whole idea unnerved him to no end. But he saw nothing. But then he heard a twig snap off to his right. He looks, and there, in the shadows, are two figures, shorter than himself, but with much larger heads. And as the figures stepped out of the shadows into what little light there was, he saw that they were two extraterrestrials. They were the typical ones with the large heads and the big eyes, and they wore a shimmering silver metallic cloth-like material for clothing. But as soon as he saw them, he was not afraid. He knew that he should be. But there was something about them that had a calming effect on him. He had a sense deep inside his soul that they wanted him to be at ease, that they did not want him to be afraid. They might have been slightly telepathic, putting these thoughts in his head, but he didn't know why. He welcomed them to Earth, and one of them spoke English, and he thanked the young man. Tim was slightly confused about this whole situation. This sort of thing doesn't happen every day. So he asked the visitors if they were lost, if they needed help in some way. The figures told him that no, they were not lost, but they thanked him anyway. They introduced themselves as scientists from their world. They travel the universe studying other cultures, and they've been studying the human race for quite some time. They've been cataloging and indexing many aspects of human culture, behavior, beliefs, and it seems as though everything about the planet Earth can be defined in some way and processed, cataloged, and filed. But there is one thing that confuses them, one thing they cannot seem to get their minds around, and they need to discover more about this item. When Tim asked them what it was, one of the aliens asked, "Who is God?" This shocked Tim. God? What do you mean, who is God? God is God. And the aliens were not satisfied with that response. They said they have studied that the human culture has many different names and faces and aspects of God or gods, but it seems as though the majority of the beliefs have one singular entity or deity known as God. The aliens asked for Tim's help in locating this individual so they may interview and study him for their files. They've been monitoring the human race for some time. They've been listening to their radio broadcasts, watching their television programs, watching their movies, and they've read a lot of their books. But nothing tells them anything about the origins, the culture, the society, or the general composition and makeup of the individual known as God. And for a scientist, that's quite maddening. And Tim wasn't sure if he could help. He didn't have a lot of knowledge himself, and he's not sure if he could even explain to people who don't know about God what God is. God is one of the biggest mysteries in the entire human race. But he decided to give it his best shot. He simply said that God was a supreme being, had omnipotent powers, unlimited power to do whatever he wanted. He could create things from nothing. He made the earth, he made the entire universe. He made everything that is, everything that was, and everything that ever will be. God had no beginning and has no end. He will exist for all eternity. The scientists listened, and they urged him to please go on. Tim thought, and he just said that God is like a parent, a loving parent. He wants the best for all his children, human and non-human alike. He wants us to grow, to mature, to become better than we are, to learn from our mistakes, and to care for all of his creations, to become as close to perfect as we can possibly be. That's not to say he won't punish us if we do something wrong, but he wants us to succeed, and he gives us every opportunity to do what's right. He wants us to love one another, to be good and kind, to be gentle, to be humble. And he wants us to get to know him. And the aliens are like, great, where do we find him? Where does he live? And Tim just looked up and says, well, he's in heaven. The aliens looked up and said, one of those points of light? One of the stars? A star system? What are the coordinates? And Tim says, I don't think it works like that. I think heaven exists, but doesn't exist on the same reality as we do. It's here, but it's not at the same time. The aliens were becoming confused again. And they said, well, if he's up there somewhere, in a quasar, a pulsar, a nebula, there's got to be a gateway to heaven somewhere, and we will find it. Thank you, young human. You may not have answered our question as to who he is, but at least you gave us a direction as to where we must find him. And Tim said, no, I don't think that's right. If you stick around a little bit, maybe you can talk to a grown-up, someone who might have a little bit more information. And the alien says, no, we are pressed for time. We must complete our assignment. And from the looks of things, it sounds as though we are going to have a long journey ahead of us to find this heaven. Tim watched the aliens turn to leave, but he didn't want them to go. He felt that there was so much more he could say. He didn't have the words for it, but he felt that they must understand that they just can't go out into the universe and go from star to star to try and find God. That there's a whole lot more they need to understand before they can begin to realize what God truly is. And they're not going to find him the way they're looking for him. He tried to call them back, but they realized that he was not the one to talk to, that he was limited in his knowledge and information. They were appreciative of what help he tried to give, but they felt that their quest was out amongst the stars. So, as they said their farewells, they got into their spaceship, which was behind some trees. It was darkened, but as the aliens waved goodbye, and Tim was like, sorry to see them go. But he watched the hatch close, and the spaceship, which looked like a big flying saucer, suddenly began to glow, and it rose up silently into the air. And Tim felt the air kind of vibrate around him, and he could hear a hum as the ship rose. And then, with a flash of light, the spaceship just took off like a streak across the heavens. And I guess anyone looking at it would just think it was a shooting star. And Tim was alone, once again, in the back of the motel property, looking up at the night sky. Now he felt very much alone. But he was grateful for the experience. I mean, how many people get to say that they met aliens? Not that anyone would believe him. But he admired the aliens, their thirst for knowledge. But he was also sad because he knew that they would never find God the way they were looking for him. And he didn't know where their journey would take them. But he was hoping that at some point, maybe God would reveal himself. Because he felt that if God cares for us mere humans, he's got to care for them as well. And that maybe, just maybe, these two little alien scientists would actually find what they're looking for. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed that, please like this video. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe to my channel. More stories will be coming. And I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Have a great day.